Amen.
The scripture reading this morning will be taken from Joshua chapter 11, verse 15. Joshua 11, verse 15. As the Lord had commanded Moses his servant, so Moses commanded Joshua, and so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses.
Good morning, everyone. We must now all face the choice between doing what is right and doing what is easy. J.K. Rowling had Professor Dumbledore speak these words in the fictional Harry Potter books. But even in fiction, we can see the truthfulness of that statement, because as we know, doing what is right is seldom easy. This will be the first discussion that we have about our series of leadership in the Bible, specifically in the Old Testament. And I'm honored to be kicking off this series by looking at the character of Joshua this morning. Now, throughout this lesson, we're going to see several examples of Joshua building his character and his leadership by choosing to do what is right, especially as it pertains to the commands of God. I will challenge you, as we go through this series, to keep a lookout for how some of these other leaders that we're going to be covering may do this same thing. You know, when Matt Gloy had first told me about this series, can I say that I was actually very excited to get up and talk about this? Because this involves a principle that I used to always tell the employees that I managed at my old job, that they should constantly be learning and constantly be improving themselves by watching other people. In both the good and the bad, there is always something that we can be learning if we take the time to observe others and ask ourselves, why? Why did something work or not work? And I think that God shares this same expectation for us. Because for all the things that the Bible has, all the things that it contains, whether that's history, philosophy, or poetry, the thing that it contains most is biography. God had the authors of the Bible include these accounts so that we can learn from them, both the things that we should do and the things that we shouldn't do. You hear parents warn all the time, don't make my mistake. Or they try and help their children by saying, this worked out for me in a similar situation. Why do they do that? Because they want us to be successful. And I believe that this is the same for God and his desire for us, to learn from the history of his people so that we aren't doomed to repeat it. Now, with that opening out of the way, let's examine the first leader in this series, Joshua, the right-hand man and eventual replacement for Moses. Now let's start with the basics of Joshua. Namely, who was he? Well, to start with, Joshua wasn't his given name. We can read in Numbers 13 that he was actually named Hoshea, a Hebrew word that is translated to mean salvation, before Moses changed his name to Yehoshua, or Joshua. Now, Joshua is first introduced to us as the person that Moses put in charge of the army to lead them in battle against the Amalekites in Exodus 17. But we aren't told until Exodus 24 that he was actually Moses' servant. And Numbers 11:28 clarifies to tell us that he was Moses' personal attendant and had been from his youth. Now, as his personal servant, Joshua accompanies Moses most everywhere he goes. In fact, he actually goes with Moses up onto Mount Sinai the first time when he goes to get the covenant from God. And we can read in Exodus 24:13 through 14. So Moses arose with Joshua his servant, and Moses went up to the mountain of God. But to the elders he said, wait for us here until we return to you. So while Moses goes into the cloud of the Lord's presence to receive instructions on the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant, Joshua apparently stays somewhere up on the mountain, away from Moses, but also away from the people. He wanted to be as close to his master as he could be. We are further told in 33 verse 11 of Exodus that he was the son of none, and a young man by their standards. probably about 40 years old if he was in similar age to his peer Caleb. And this brings us neatly along to the point that Joshua and Caleb were both part of the 12 spies that were sent by Israel into Canaan from Moses and the rest of the congregation in Numbers 13. Of those 12 spies, I'm sure that you remember that it was only Joshua and Caleb that brought back a favorable report that they should go into the land and attack it, whereas all the 10 other spies convinced the congregation that it'd be better to walk around and die in the wilderness than to go in and attack the land. Now, after this period of wandering, Moses is near his own death and wants to pass on the mantle of leadership to somebody else. So Moses asks of God to direct him to a replacement, and God shows him to appoint Joshua. Joshua then becomes the man to lead the people of Israel in their conquest of the land of Canaan, which he does so successfully, starting with the city of Jericho. Joshua eventually leads the people to sweep across some 31 kings as they move across the promised land. Well, most of the promised land. Finally, we know that Joshua lived to be 110 years old, from Joshua 24:29, as it records his death, both full of honor and full of years as a mighty servant of the Lord. So here we have the facts of the life of Joshua, born Hoshea, the son of Nun. A truly remarkable life, and one of the most impactful Jews in the history of their becoming a nation. So how did this remarkable man demonstrate leadership in his life? How can we look at the things that he did well and imitate those in our own life to help us today? Personally, I see 4 major ways that Joshua showed leadership in what he did. First, he showed leadership in how good of a follower he was. Now, while this may seem counterintuitive, you cannot know how to lead people unless you first know how to follow others and understand what it is that followers need from their leaders. We can see his devotion to following Moses in Exodus 33:11, where it reads, "Thus the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, just as a man speaks to his friend. When Moses returned to the camp, his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent." Now, this was called out for us because this was a higher level of devotion than most personal servants ever gave to their masters. We see that Joshua was wholly devoted to his master, never leaving Moses' side and never deviating from his commands. We can also see a major example of him following the commands of God in Joshua chapter 5. When Joshua, who is already the new leader of the Israelite nation near Jericho, are looking to attack it soon, God tells Joshua that the males of Israel who have been born out in the wilderness these last 40 years have not been circumcised and need to be circumcised immediately. Joshua then sets out to get this accomplished. Now, circumcising your fighting men before a major battle, when you know they're going to be in so much pain that they cannot even fight until they heal, is the exact opposite of what most military leaders would ever recommend to you. Yet Joshua puts his faith in God and follows the orders that he has been given, especially as he would expect the men he gives, the orders that he gives, to follow his commands. He obeys and does what is right, regardless of the circumstances. Joshua, being a good follower, is the definition of leading by example. Another 2 qualities that Joshua has of leadership were that he was both strong and courageous. Now, this could honestly be the entire theme for Joshua because he's told this 7 times by my count from both Moses and God before he takes on the leadership mantle. And he later echoes this command to all the people who follow him. Now, let's start with strength. Leaders need to be strong. They need to set the example for those that follow them. Again, leading by example. They need to bear the burdens of leadership, to carry the hopes and the trust of the people that they will be leading. If a leader crumples under the weight of their responsibility, they will bring down all of those who are relying on them as well. Joshua had to lead some 600,000 fighting men into the land, probably close to 2 million people in total who were following his every command. Do we think that he didn't have to be strong with that many people looking to him for guidance? To keep the confidence of that many people high? To make decisions that would affect the life and death of that many people? Now also, do you think that you, as a preacher, as a teacher, or as a missionary, will not also be looked at as a person of authority, as a leader in the same way? You will be, so be strong. Along with being strong, leaders also need to be courageous. Now, courage doesn't mean that you don't fear anything. People who don't fear anything aren't brave, they're stupid. And if they don't fear what they should, they're soon going to be dead. Courage is having a healthy fear for the things that you should have a healthy fear for, like saying that word, yet doing what is right in the face of that fear anyway. It's about using the strength that you have to accomplish things even when they're scary, even when they're hard, or even when they're dangerous. Remember, Joshua was part of the original spies that went into Canaan. He saw the people there who were like Goliath, the other Amalekites who were in the land. Do you think that he needed courage as he went to go face those giants of men and the fortified cities that they had built? For us today, we face something even stronger. Satan, a powerful being who stalks the land as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. It took courage for Joshua to trust in God as he faced these adversaries, and it takes courage for us to trust in him as we face ours. On that note of him going into the land with the other spies, do you think that it also took courage for Joshua to be one of the two spies that said, "Let's go into Canaan," when 80% of the others, over 80%, who saw the same things that they did, said, "We can't do it. If we go, we will die"? Courage is also about standing up against the crowd for what is right. It takes courage to be in the minority. And as Christians, we should all have such courage in the face of how the world tells us to conform to itself and its standards. As Christian leaders, it takes even more so. Now, the final way that Joshua exhibited good leadership qualities was that he was uncompromising as it came to God. People will always try to bend the rules, to push the envelope, and to see what they can get away with. Yet Joshua enforced God's directives without compromise. In Joshua 11:15, the passage that Brad read for us, it reads again, "Just as the Lord had commanded Moses his servant, so Moses commanded Joshua, and so Joshua did. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord had commanded Moses." Now we can only hope that the same will be said for any of us when we die, that we had left nothing undone of what the Lord had directed us to do. Now, in addition to being uncompromising in what he did to fulfill the Lord's directives, he was also uncompromising in how he spoke the truth about the Lord. In Joshua's farewell address, in chapters 23 and 24 of the book of Joshua, he tells the entire congregation of Israel what to do to stay true to the Lord. Not to intermarry with the other nations, and not to serve any other gods. If they remained true to the Lord, they would be blessed. But if they forsook him, they would be cursed and driven out of the land, just as the previous inhabitants had been. Joshua did not sugarcoat anything. He told the people the truth about God. You will be tempted and pressured to change your message also. Remember that it doesn't matter how people feel or what they personally agree with or disagree with. If you serve God, you will live. If you abandon God, you will die. We can see in all of these things that Joshua always strove to do what was right and not what was easy. Now, thus far, we have discussed the good aspects of the leadership of Joshua. But as we think about all the things that we can be learning from him, let's look at some of the other things that he did that we shouldn't be doing. Perhaps the biggest opportunity in what we see in the leadership of Joshua was that he did not recognize the value of his replacement. Let's turn to Numbers 27, verses 15 through 17, and read what Moses had to say when he was faced with his own impending death. Numbers 27, 15 through 17. Then Moses spoke to the Lord, saying, May the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation, who will go out and come in before them, and who will lead them out and bring them in, so that the congregation of the Lord will not be like sheep which have no shepherd. Like sheep that have no shepherd. What do sheep with no shepherd look like? They're aimless. The whole flock does not move as a cohesive unit. They're not going anywhere or accomplishing anything. They're complacent. Moses foresaw this and looked to God to have somebody to replace him. The transition was then smooth because they had already taken care of it, and Joshua helped guide the people into the land of Canaan and take the land that they should have had. But when Joshua died, what happened? He had left instruction to all of the tribes that they needed to finish taking the little bits of territory that they had not taken. But they never did it. The people they refused to displace then became snares to the Israelites and led them to worshiping idols and to falling away from God. Because no one was in charge, the people followed the path of least resistance. And as Bob Turner likes to say, the path of least resistance makes both men and rivers crooked. These people did what was easy instead of doing what was right, because Joshua never recognized the value in appointing a leader to replace himself once he was gone. You know, there's a saying that I stole from True to Dare, that the fruits of a leader are not followers. The fruits of a leader are other leaders. As a leader, you need to realize that you are not permanent, and you should be training your replacement. Don't leave that up to chance, or let somebody who you wouldn't choose seize the initiative and ruin all the progress that you have made. The last thing that we can learn from Joshua was what happens when you don't fully trust in God over everything else. In Exodus 34:12, God said, Watch yourself, that you make no covenant with the inhabitants of the land into which you are going, or it will become a snare in your midst. Yet in the 9th chapter of the book of Joshua, we see the Gibeonites, a people from the area that they should be conquering, dress up as travelers from a foreign land far away with old tattered supplies and request a treaty with Israel. Joshua and the other elders of Israel accept the people's word and the supplies that they show them as proof that they have come from such a far place, that they are who they say they are. They never ask God for direction. And 3 days later, they find out that they have in fact been lied to. So why do I say that Joshua didn't fully trust God here? Because he trusted in his own judgment instead. When the situation involved making a treaty, something that God had given them very specific instructions about. Now, I don't want us to think that Joshua or any other leader should be asking God for direction for every single decision in their life, as far as what color shirt to put on in the morning and what they do when they get to their car. But we should be reaching out to God when the matters involve God. We should always be seeking his guidance first. If the Gibeonites had been honest with Joshua and told them that, yes, they were from the land that they were going to be conquering, I have no doubt that Joshua would have refused and done exactly as the Lord directed him to. But people do not always tell us the truth. Situations are not as always black and white as we would like them to be. But we have a God that loves us and wants us to seek first his righteousness in what we do. Leaders need to take the time to seek God's will in everything they do, especially when those decisions deal with spiritual health and well-being. God will give wisdom to those who seek it from him honestly. Those who don't doubt that they will be granted it, as we read in James 1, 5 through 8. So with all of that said, what have we learned about Joshua as we conclude our lesson this morning? First, we reviewed his background information and his role as a leader in shaping the ancient nation of Israel. We discussed all the traits that he had that made him a good leader. First, that he was a good follower. Second, that he was strong. Third, that he was courageous. And last, that he was uncompromising when it came to God. Then we covered some of the traits of Joshua that we should seek to avoid. Not training a replacement being first among them, and not seeking God's guidance in decisions that affect the spiritual health of others. Now, I had told you as we started our lesson on Joshua today that we must all face the choice of doing what is right and doing what is easy. As Joshua showed us today, and as these other leaders throughout the rest of this series are going to be showing us, everybody will be facing this decision countless times in their lives. And their character and quality is based off of how they answer it. So how will you answer it? I pray that all of us in this room have the strength and the courage to lead others as Joshua did, that we grow into men and women who do what is right whenever we get the chance. May God bless every one of you in your Christian journey as we seek to bring the Word of God to this sin-darkened world.